The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in April. Margaret Hollis found it in the mailbox between a seed catalog and an electric bill. Official county stationery, the seal pressed into the paper. She opened it standing in the driveway with the engine of her truck still ticking. The language was formal, but the message was simple. The county had approved a highway expansion project. A new 4-lane connector road would cut through the eastern portion of her property. Under the state's quick-take statute, the county had authority to begin construction within 30 days. A compensation offer was enclosed, $3,800 per acre for 47 acres. She had until the end of the month to accept the payment and vacate the affected land. Margaret read the letter twice. Then she folded it neatly, walked across the yard, past the barn, past the old equipment shed, down the slope to the edge of the east pasture. She stopped in front of the oak tree. The tree had been there longer than anyone could remember. Her grandfather used to say it was already old when his grandfather was young. The trunk was over 6 feet across at the base. The lowest branches were thick as fence posts. The canopy spread wide enough to shade a 1/4 acre of ground. During summer, cattle gathered beneath it to escape the heat. During storms, the branches bent and groaned but never broke. Margaret pulled a nail from her jacket pocket. She pressed the letter flat against the bark and drove the nail through the paper with one strike of a fencing hammer. Then she stepped back and looked at it. The county wanted her land. The letter was their claim, and now it belonged to the tree. The highway project had been building quietly for over 2 years, though Margaret hadn't known about it at first. The State Transportation Department had been planning the connector road for nearly a decade. The original route was supposed to follow the old railroad corridor 2 miles south. That alignment ran through existing public right-of-way. No private land needed, no homes displaced. But a series of environmental reviews had stalled that option. Wetland delineations along the old rail bed, a nesting habitat for a state-listed bird species, the kind of complications that add years and millions to a road project. So the planners redrew the route. The new alignment cut through agricultural land instead. Open fields, fewer regulatory obstacles, faster approvals, and the new path ran directly through the eastern half of Margaret's property, through the pasture, through the hay fields, and through the oak tree. Margaret's neighbors had already signed. The Petersons to the north accepted their offer within 2 weeks. The Garcias to the south held out for 3 months before settling for an additional $400 per acre. The Webbs across the road signed without negotiating at all. One by one, the parcels along the new route were acquired. Easements filed, survey stakes driven into the ground. Margaret was the last holdout. The county sent a negotiator first. A polite man in khakis who walked the property line with her and explained the project's benefits. Better traffic flow, economic growth, increased property values for remaining land. He spoke the way people speak when they already know the ending. Margaret listened carefully. Then she said no. They sent a second negotiator. This one wore a suit and carried a laptop. He mentioned the quick-take statute 3 times in the first 10 minutes. He explained that the county could proceed with or without her agreement. The compensation was fair, he said. Fighting it would cost more in legal fees than the land was worth. He smiled when he said that, the kind of smile that assumed the conversation was already over. Margaret listened again, and again she said no. The third visit wasn't a negotiator. It was the letter. Margaret called her lawyer the same afternoon. His name was Dean Whitfield, a quiet man who had handled farm legal work in the county for 31 years. He knew every family, every fence line, and most of the judges by first name. He read the letter and sighed. Quick take is hard to fight, Margaret. The county has broad authority under the statute. He set the letter down. I can file objections, but honestly the odds aren't good. Margaret nodded. I know, but I'm not fighting the road. Whitfield looked at her. Then what are you fighting? Margaret pointed out the window of his office toward the east. The tree. Whitfield paused. He had driven past the Hollis farm 1,000 times over 30 years. He knew the tree. Everyone in the county knew the tree. It was the kind of landmark people used for directions. Turn left past the Hollis place, the one with the big oak. Margaret reached into the canvas bag she had brought and pulled out a folder. Inside were documents she had been collecting quietly for nearly 8 months. Letters from the State Historical Society, a scientific report from the university's forestry department, photographs of the tree dating back to '93, 2 newspaper clippings from the 1940s, and 1 document she had found buried in the county's own archives. She placed the forestry report on his desk first. That tree is 240 years old. The forestry department confirmed it through core sampling last October. She opened the report to the summary page. It's a bur oak, one of the oldest documented specimens in the state. Whitfield read the report carefully. The core sample analysis was detailed. Growth rings mapped decade by decade. The report noted the tree's ecological significance. Root structure supporting soil stability across nearly half an acre. Canopy providing habitat for 14 documented bird species. The trunk cavity sheltering a colony of bats that consumed agricultural pests across the surrounding farms every summer. Margaret pulled out the next document. This is from the State Historical Society. She had submitted the tree for evaluation under the state's Heritage Tree Registry in August of the previous year. The evaluation took 5 months. The oak met every criterion, age exceeding 150 years. Trunk diameter above minimum threshold, species significance, historical documentation, and community value confirmed by letters from 23 neighboring families. Whitfield looked up slowly. It's registered? Margaret nodded. As of March 1st, Whitfield leaned back in his chair. Because the State Heritage Tree Act, passed in 1987 and amended twice since, included a provision that most people had never read carefully. Section 14, subsection C. It stated that any tree entered into the Heritage Registry could not be removed, relocated, or materially harmed by any government action, including eminent domain proceedings, without a full environmental impact review and written approval from the State Heritage Commission. That review process took a minimum of 18 months. And in the 37-year history of the Act, the Commission had never once approved the removal of a registered heritage tree. Not once. Whitfield set the report down. He looked at Margaret for a long moment. You've been planning this since you first heard about the new route. Margaret picked up the eviction letter from his desk. Since the day they moved the first survey stake onto my land. She placed the final document in front of him. And this is the original county survey from 1847. She pointed to a small notation drawn by hand at the edge of the map, a circle with 2 lines extending from it, the surveyor's mark for a notable tree. The county's own records prove that oak has been a documented landmark for 179 years. Whitfield read the survey entry. The notation was clear: large oak, east quarter Hollis section. The handwriting was faded but legible. Below it, a distance measurement used the tree as a reference point for the entire eastern boundary of the original land patent. He closed the folder. Margaret, he said quietly, I think the county has a problem. The filing arrived at the county planning office on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, the highway project manager had called an emergency meeting with the county attorney. The heritage tree registration was verified through the state database. The Section 14 provision was confirmed. The county attorney, a man named Gareth Polk, reviewed the statute 3 times before accepting that the tree could not be legally touched without state commission approval. That would take at least a year and a half and had never been granted in the history of the program. The project's timeline, which had been advancing steadily for over 2 years, stopped cold. The county tried to find alternatives. They proposed routing the road around the tree with a curved bypass and a 40-foot buffer zone. The state arborist rejected the plan within a week, stating that construction vibration, heavy equipment traffic, and root zone disruption within 60 feet of the trunk could constitute material harm under the Act. They proposed transplanting the tree. The forestry department estimated a 95% mortality rate for relocating a 214-year-old oak with a root system extending over 40 feet in every direction. The commission would never approve it. They proposed trimming the canopy to allow construction equipment to pass beneath. The heritage designation protected the tree from any material alteration, including pruning of major limbs. For 3 weeks, the county's engineering team scrambled. Plans were redrawn, cost projections recalculated. The simple, fast agricultural route that was supposed to avoid all the environmental complications of the old railroad corridor had run directly into one of the most protected living landmarks in the state. The county administrator, a woman named Patricia Langdon, finally requested a meeting with Margaret. They met in Langdon's office on a Wednesday afternoon. Whitfield came along. Polk was there with 2 assistants and a stack of files. Langdon was direct. "Mrs. Hollis, you understand this road serves the entire county." Margaret nodded. "I do." Langdon folded her hands. "We're prepared to increase the compensation offer to $8,500 per acre. We can also guarantee relocation assistance and priority access to comparable agricultural land in the county land bank." Margaret shook her head. I'm not selling." Langdon paused. "That tree cannot stop this project forever, Mrs. Hollis." Margaret looked at her calmly. "It doesn't need to." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded map. She opened it on Langdon's desk. It showed the original railroad corridor route, the one abandoned 2 years earlier. Margaret pointed to a section marked in blue. Last month, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service completed their updated habitat survey for this corridor. She placed another document beside the map. The species that triggered the original environmental hold was downlisted from endangered to threatened in January. The critical habitat restriction along the rail corridor has been formally lifted. Langdon stared at the document. Margaret continued, "The original route is available again. It runs entirely through existing public right-of-way. No private land acquisition required. No eminent domain hearings, no condemnation orders." She tapped the map once, "and no 200-year-old oak trees." Polk leaned over and read the Fish and Wildlife update line by line. Langdon watched him. No one spoke for nearly a minute. Margaret stood up. She picked up her bag and looked at Langdon. "That tree didn't stop your road." She paused at the door. "It just made you find the right path." 6 weeks later, the county board voted 4-1 to return to the original railroad corridor route. The cost savings from eliminating private land acquisition offset the additional engineering work. Construction began the following spring along the old rail line, exactly where it had been originally planned a decade earlier. The condemnation order against the Hollis farm was formally rescinded. Margaret received the official notice on a Monday morning. She read it in the driveway, the same spot where she had opened the first letter 11 months before. She walked the notice down the hill to the east pasture. The original eviction letter was still nailed to the oak tree. The paper had faded in months of sun and rain. The words were nearly unreadable now. She didn't remove it. She nailed the rescission notice right next to it. A reporter from the county newspaper came out to the farm the following week. She asked Margaret why she had nailed the first letter to the tree instead of taking it to court. Margaret looked toward the pasture where the oak stood. Its canopy was full and green in the late spring light. Afternoon shadows stretched across the grass beneath it. "Because the tree was the argument," she said quietly. "I just had to make sure someone listened." The reporter asked one more question. "Were you ever worried the county would find a way around the Heritage Act?" Margaret smiled. "That tree has survived 214 years of storms, droughts, ice, and lightning." She shook her head slowly. "I wasn't worried about paperwork.